Hi guys, welcome to class. So, well, let's talk about an epidemic. Let's not take it high and say pandemic. Yeah, we're in a pandemic, but know what is epidemic. So, let's do like a retrograde reasoning. Yeah, if you say pandemic is outbreak of a disease involving a large region of the world, or let's say involving a large region of the world. So what will we now call an epidemic? Well, pandemic really say worldwide. But even this coronavirus, yes, there were so many cases presented, but some were less affected than the others, right? So, and we can't know all, right? You only know what is popular or what you have. So you can just liken a pandemic to outbreak of a disease over a much larger region, or a much larger region of the world, or over a larger region, basically, of the world. So epidemic is the outbreak of a disease condition. This is defined as the outbreak. This is defined as the outbreak of a disease condition in a localized region for a limited period of time. So that defines epidemic, the outbreak of disease condition in a limited region, in a localized region for a limited period of time. I use the word localized region to say that we can boundary it. Yeah. It's just like when we say there was an epidemic of Ebola. Initially, it started, we can say an epidemic. We can define the Ebola can satisfy an epidemic in the sense that, neighboring countries also affected, Liberia, Nigeria, they as well also affected, but it's localized. You understand? It's always for a limited period of time. We are not still having Ebola epidemic now. It has gone since 2014. What we are dealing now is the pandemic, which of course will also still serve a limited period of time. Endemic is different in the sense that endemic is much more, is more like a spectrum, so we are becoming much more narrower. So in an endemic, the area, the focus is very smaller compared to the area of focus you have in an epidemic. Likewise, the pandemic, you'll be looking at a larger area of focus. We are talking about much more regions in focus, but in epidemic, it's much narrower, but more broader than an endemic, but less broader than a pandemic. So now, epidemic, most diseases that we present as an epidemic in which you have this outbreak in a localized region are most times contagious disease. But like disease that will always involve direct contact, basically. Diseases where it involves direct contact between individuals. Waterborne disease also always can cause an epidemic. Yes, waterborne disease can cause an epidemic because particularly if that source of water is a common source of water. And when you have waterborne disease causing an epidemic, like for instance cholera, you see it in communities, right? Communities, not so developed communities in rural areas where it's more like everybody is having the same water supply. In urban areas, you see less of an epidemic due to a waterborne disease. It's only in communities you see that happening. Rural areas where water supply is almost the same for everybody. But across board, contagious disease, whether rural, whether urban, they always present, their disease that always been involved in these epidemics. Because most contagious disease, it has to do with contacts. So when you see contacts, when there's contact, you have spread of the disease. So you have epidemic disease presenting. You have those kind of disease forming or resulting in an epidemic, an outbreak. And when you talk about contagious disease, you're talking about diseases like chickenpox, for instance. Chickenpox. Even the common cold, or what you call the flu. The common cold, or even the common cold, or what you call the flu, they also present with they also can result in an outbreak, forming an epidemic. And that's the reason why, let's say in the workplace, when somebody presents to the office, is coughing, is sneezing, is having common cold, it's advisable for the person to just stay back 1 or 2 days and get himself together, because you don't want to spread it towards the office, to every other member in the office. Since with chickenpox, even smallpox as well, these are contagious diseases, so they have the tendency to form an outbreak, forming a pandemic. And among animals as well, anthrax. Anthrax is a very deadly disease that affects animals. So for those, this is of concern to those who rear animals, anthrax. And that's why when an animal comes out with anthrax, it's always advisable to quarantine the animal. Remove him from from other cattle and let him stay somewhere separate until you treat him. Same thing with foot and mouth disease, which also affects animals too. Foot and mouth disease, and also viruses like Ebola virus disease can form an epidemic, and of course Lassa fever as well. Lassa fever is also an example of disease that can result in an epidemic due to their contagious nature. Finally, we have polio. Polio too is another example of disease that can form an epidemic due to their contagious nature. Chicken pox, common cold, smallpox, anthrax, that is catered for animals. Also the foot and mouth disease, even Newcastle disease as well. All these diseases, they have tendency to form epidemics, to form outbreaks. Ebola virus disease, Lassa fever, as well as polio. All these are diseases that use their contagious nature. They are the ideal candidate or the likely suspect of an epidemic. See you in the next class.